Hello everyone, we are glad to have you all joining this Ghent University Cerise lecture on international criminal law after Bucha with Gleb Bogush, organized in cooperation with the Ghent Roland Jacquemin International Law Institute. My name is Sebastiaan van Severen, and I'm a PhD researcher at Ghent University focused on Russian approaches to international humanitarian law. It was my intention to actually be in Moscow at this moment and under the supervision of Dr. Gleb Bogush to be researching the Russian approaches to international humanitarian law, but as you can see and probably guess why, this has not worked. And so we're in Ghent and we're organizing a lecture for you here. We are approaching the third month of a conflict that was allegedly intended to last a mere 3 days. And in those 3 months, we have been confronted with an avalanche of images, often in high definition, of multiple kinds of reprehensible horrors. The rules of international humanitarian law are being violated on a massive scale. And after having seen civilian housing in Ukraine being targeted and civilian shelters being bombed indiscriminately, international indignation rose to its highest pitch with the growing reports of slaughter and indiscriminate violence in the town of Bucha on the outskirts of Kiev. In contemporary fashion, the Russian Federation not only denied any involvement in Bucha, but moreover accused Ukraine and the West of staging a provocation, or even having committed the violence against civilians to frame Russia. In response, a number of parallel criminal investigations has been initiated into the many potential war crimes during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We can only guess at the true scale of what is happening, though. After all, we do not yet know how many Buchas have happened in this conflict and what is behind the horizon. Will the perpetrators ever face justice? Who has the jurisdiction to do so? Will international law prove useful in prosecuting war crimes? And what is the Russian approach to matters of international humanitarian law? With us to discuss these questions is Dr. Gleb Bogush, a Russian expert of international criminal law. Dr. Bogush is currently a visiting researcher at the Uppsala University and visiting lecturer at the University of Luxembourg. Prior to March 2022, he was an associate professor at Moscow State University and HSE University in Moscow, where he taught public international law and international criminal law. Mr. Bogush's research interests include international public law, international criminal law, international justice, international human rights law. His most recent publications and talks deal with the issues of criminal responsibility for core international crimes, national implementation of international law in the Russian legal order, and the history of international criminal justice. So you can already hear that this set of expertise is excellent for the topic at hand today. Before we start, I will remind the audience that there will be time for the Q&A after the talk. And any questions you may have can be entered in the chat in this app and will be presented to the speaker within the time constraints that are allotted to us. The topic of today, may I remind you, is one of colossal importance, but also one of intense emotions. We therefore ask you to treat everyone involved in this lecture with a minimum of consideration and respect and civility. And now, without further ado, I give the floor to Dr. Gleb Bogush.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for your kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. I thank the Russian platform for organizing this lecture. This is indeed not an easy talk, not an easy lecture for me. As Sebastian mentioned, prior to the start of the war, I had been teaching and researching international criminal law in Russia. I was a professor of international criminal law in leading Moscow universities. I also lectured on this topic in other law schools in Russia. So that's the topic which we discussed, the topic of war crimes, the issue of responsibility in a theoretical fashion, based on the historical examples and the conflicts on the other parts of the world. Now we have this bloodshed not only in Europe, but this war involves the country where I worked and where I lived. So this is not an easy talk. I focus today on individual criminal responsibility. Individual responsibility for core international crimes committed in the war in Ukraine. So a few preliminary observations that I would like to make. So first, the war that we are now witnessing, it didn't start in February this year. It started 8 years ago, after the seizure of administrative buildings in Crimea by Russian servicemen. It started with the hybrid war in the eastern Ukraine, in Donbass. And it was already many events which can be also characterized as international crimes. But even given all this long history of the conflict, the events which we now witnessing is of different scale. There is a Bucha. Is of course I agree that it's not only one place in Ukraine, which is probably we have many such places. Is of course the milestone in this war. We have not only the issues of legality of the attacks of the military operation, but we now have the huge issue of responsibility for atrocities against civilian population. We have the issue of responsibility. What is now discussed a lot is who are responsible, and I think the one of the issues which we have to deal with is what is responsibility. So there are lots of discussions about collective responsibility of Russian people, Russian society, the collective responsibility of international community for non-prevention of this war. I think that individual responsibility is a proper focus as well. So it's not exclude any considerations of the individual of the collective responsibility, but it's I think a proper response to what happened. In international law, the collective guilt, collective punishment is a kind of taboo. It's even a war crime itself. Collective responsibility is mostly associated in international law with the state responsibility, the responsibility of the legal fictions, of the responsibility of collectives, where we always can find various members who are not participating in the specific acts that led to the violation of international law. And in the idea of individual responsibility actually was firmly established in international law just after the Second World War, with the prosecution of the persons who committed crime, mostly Nazi war criminals. That the major war criminals have been sentenced, that have been convicted and sentenced in Nuremberg. And the famous quote, which was recently just a week ago, was echoed by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. The quote from the Nuremberg judgment was that crimes against international law are committed by men, now we say individuals, not by abstract entities, and only by punishing individuals, provisions of international law may be enforced. I think this quote is still relevant today. It's important to talk about responsibility of states. It's important to talk about responsibility of specific groups within societies and societies in general. But when we lose focus on the individual actions of individuals, we somehow dissolved the idea of individual agency, individual responsibility. Crimes are committed by individuals, and Russia, previously Soviet Union, I believe, exemplified the paradox that Russia and Soviet Union was one of the major proponents of the idea of individual responsibility for the international crimes. In various periods of 20th century, Soviet Union, Russia was actually driving force behind many projects, such as project of prosecution of aggression, or Nuremberg trials, or some developments after the Second World War. But actually, the idea of Nuremberg, the idea of punishment of the war criminals, was a part of the myth, a part of the national pride. That it's a part of the national myth of the victorious people, and unfortunately, while Nuremberg became such important part of the national idea, the universal justice and the application of this principle to your own country didn't become such a part of national identity. I think the Russian history, at least in 20th century, but maybe even before, is a very sad history of impunity. It's not even a rule, as in many countries. It's, I think, the rule almost without any exceptions, that the gross violation of human rights, international crimes committed by the state agents, have remained unpunished. We cannot find any successful attempt, any really completed story of the prosecution of such violations. So the idea of universal justice is still not rooted in Russia, and I think this history of impunity played a very important role in what is now happening. So impunity is a major factor which actually encourage commission of the violations of international law, and I think it's a factor which is much stronger than any education, any promotion of international humanitarian law, for example. If the impunity is a part of the culture, it's quite difficult to expect anything than repetition of violation of the past. So I think the idea of individual responsibility is crucial in this conflict, and we came to the moment when it is real, and it is important, it is essential to work on accountability for international crimes that have been committed. In my talk, I would like to highlight certain major aspects of the individual responsibility for the crimes committed in this conflict. So first, I would like to highlight the issue of the legal framing of the conflict. So what kind of international crimes have been committed and may have been committed, and then I turn to the avenues, or the ways to bring a responsible person to responsibility. And finally, probably most importantly, I will discuss the issue of the challenges or obstacles which we face in pursuit of accountability for international crimes. So first, what has actually happened in Ukraine and what is happening in Ukraine? As I mentioned before, we have a conflict for already 8 years. And this period that started with the massive invasion of 24th of February this year, actually what is the meaning of this? I think that what we now have in the war, we have elements of all four core international crimes. So all crimes that give rise to individual criminal responsibility. There are four types of this crime. So first is a crime of aggression. Even 8 years ago, there was very little doubt that Russia's attack on Ukraine constituted act of aggression. Now it's beyond doubt. The invasion to Ukrainian territory, bombardment of cities, and even the goals, declared goals of the so-called special operation, actually fully satisfy the definition of aggression. It's a manifest violation of the United Nations Charter. It's an act of state that is directed against territorial integrity, political independence, and the sovereignty of Ukraine. I cannot remember the case in the recent history that the state official of one state openly denied the very existence of the sovereignty of another state. So what is happening now exemplifies the crime of aggression. The crime of aggression is a leadership crime. It's a crime that in international law, so on the national level it can be different, but in international law is a so-called leadership crime. Also only leaders of the country, persons who enjoy control over the political and military decisions are perpetrators of this crime. Crime of aggression is actually also constitute the kind of background for the crimes. So there is I think is a strong link between the sheer illegality of the war and the scale of brutality and actions that are committed in the conflict. This also create the climate of impunity because the whole war is manifestly legal, and this also create the background, the context of other international crimes. There is little doubt that the war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. So this catalog of war crimes is exemplified by various sections, but most importantly, I think I would like to highlight that the attacks on the Ukrainian cities. There are indiscriminate attacks, and also there are some horrific reports from many places where there is an indiscriminate use of weapons and attacks on civilian population. What we have also seen in Bucha and other places, we could see that the civilians are just attacked intentionally. There is little doubt that some of the actions are really are reprisally, that is gross violations of international humanitarian law, and many of these actions exemplify the worst war crimes, which we know in international criminal law. A crime against humanity. This is a third category of international crime, which is, by the way, very often overlooked in the discussions in the legal discussions about the war in Ukraine. The crimes against humanity are the inhumane acts, including murder, extermination, sexual violence, which are committed as a part of large-scale or systematic attack against civilian population. Under Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, they are punished when they are committed as a part of such attack, and when these crimes are committed as a part of the policy of state organization or in the furtherance of this policy. What we see in Ukraine is definitely satisfy elements of crime against humanity. Yes, the policy of violence against civilians needs proof. It needs sufficient proof of the existence of the context of violence against specific groups of people or generally population of the country. But I think there is a little doubt that there are at least certain elements which could be met in the behavior of the specifically Russian armed forces. So when we talk about war crimes, by the way, we also have to understand that it's no, we should apply the same requirements, the same rules exist also for Ukrainian forces. In international armed conflicts, both parties are bound by the norms of international humanitarian law and human rights law. So both parties of the conflict may commit crimes. But when we know certain cases of war crimes that probably have been committed also by Ukrainian forces when we talk about crime of aggression and crimes against humanity, I think there is very little doubt that the major charges will be brought against Russian armed forces. And finally, genocide. The genocide charge is, of course, the most serious one. It's in international law. It's very often referred as genocide is very often referred as crime of crimes. And in the context of Russian-Ukrainian conflict, genocide has a special meaning. Ukraine accuses Russia of instrumentalizing genocide as a pretext for aggression. So it's the matter for the application of Ukraine versus against Russia in the International Court of Justice. It's still, I think, the big question whether it was really a pretext or because Russia provides for different version, which I think is also the quite feasible explanation. But still, genocidal rhetoric references to genocide are used by the both parties. Accusation of genocide. Now the Ukrainian Parliament, Verkhovna Rada, they also take official decision that designating the behavior of Russian Federation as a genocide against Ukrainian people. I think it would be probably the most controversial charge in this context. The genocide is a definition of genocide require establishing so-called genocidal intent, specific intent to destroy a national, ethnic, religious, or racial group, and it's little doubt that some individuals may possess this intent, or this intent may emerge in the course of the war. But in the context of international prosecution, there is a very unlikely event that one individual may be found guilty of genocide, while the whole event would not be called this way. So it's also a question of the policy of state, the initial goal to destroy ethnic or national group. In the context of genocide, I would like also to point to another norm of international criminal law, which also establishes responsibility for direct and public incitement of genocide. In the context of genocide, it's very important to look at the behavior of to look at the propaganda, the role of the propaganda and the media. We know that in all recognized genocide, at least in the 20th century, media propaganda generally played an important role. It was instrumental in Rwanda. It was instrumental in Nazi Germany. It was also instrumental, by the way, in the context of the Bosnian War. Here we have a really important question of the responsibility of the propagandist. So the propaganda, which actually demonized the Ukrainian people and Ukrainian statehood, is is present in Russia for years, and now we have several cases where the really certain publications of propagandists and certain statements of propagandists, they borderline. I think this definition of direct and public incitement. Important in this charge is that the incitement to genocide is punishable regardless that the fact that genocide is actually committed. So it's a crime which can be prosecuted even if there was no proof that the genocide really took place. So I think in the context of this war, it has a special meaning also with regard to the role, the really notorious role of persons who called for annihilation of certain groups. Some of these groups, by the way, have been invented, that they just the product of dehumanization of the population, certain part of the population of Ukraine. So we have the broad the choice between various provisions of international criminal law that can be used in characterization of certain incident, and generally they can be used in the prosecution strategy. So we see that one crime, for example, is a leadership crime that requires that involving the question of immunities of high official. Some crimes are basically include the perpetrators of different levels. So we have, I think, a lot of various options. But I think the central thing that the central problem here, how to frame these crimes within the whole context of the war of aggression. I think it would be the new page in this the history of international criminal law, because we have previously we didn't have a chance to after the Second World War there was no other conflict where the crime of aggression can be exposed as the central element of the conflict. What are the options for the prosecution? So international crimes can be committed by any individual, and they can be prosecuted by any state or by international tribunal. So in the context of international criminal law, all states have the power to contribute to the accountability. But of course, the most relevant states that we're talking about today is Ukraine and I think just potentially Russia. Ukraine is a crime scene. It's a state that has territorial jurisdiction, and I think it defines its leading role in prosecution of the most incidents. It defines a role of Ukraine as the state of investigation of the primary investigation of the most incidents. But it's itself a problem. It's a problem for Ukrainian. It's a really the big burden of the Ukrainian legal system. It's an inevitable questions of impartiality of investigation, and I think the mostly Ukrainian strategy is quite right at the moment. It relies on not only on international support but on international involvement. I think the most important to make Ukrainian efforts efficient is international involvement and international assistance to Ukraine. I think there is no alternative to Ukraine because as a territorial state in terms of the future and current and future prosecutions of international crimes, but the inevitable question is how efficient it can be. I have no doubt in the professionalism of many legal and other professionals in Ukraine, but I think it's this jurisdiction certainly has limits. So for me, the best way for international communities to help, to assist, and try to provide opportunities also for the Ukrainian criminal justice system. As Russia is concerned, I think the similar problem of impartiality and the capacity of Russia to cope with the huge number of incidents, even in this so far a bit unlikely scenario that the system of justice in Russia will be kind of restored and it can deal with the prosecution of its own nationals and its own servicemen. Russia, unlike Ukraine before the 2014, dealt with the armed conflict in its own territory. The two conflicts, the two wars in Chechnya has resulted in zero prosecution for war crimes or crimes against humanity, which don't exist as a concept in Russian law. But some individuals have been convicted, some officers, soldiers, but it's just a few individuals. They have been convicted for ordinary crimes under domestic law. So international humanitarian law, the concepts of IHL, international humanitarian law, have not been utilized by Russian courts. So that was actually the story mostly the story of impunity. So it's very difficult to imagine that this system can be quickly restored and it will be capable to really prosecute the crimes of this war. However, I think that there is a certain potential for, at least for some cases, which exist in the future Russian efforts, because I believe that certain efforts in terms of transitional justice process will be necessary if Russia wants to continue to be part of international community after the war, after this war. International Criminal Court, the permanent ICC has a very limited jurisdiction, but in the context of Ukraine, I think it has a great potential. The only problem of the ICC, I think, in terms of jurisdiction, is that it cannot prosecute the crime of aggression, which is central without amending of the statute. So it's not realistic to expect that it could do this. But still, now the ICC has support of not only states, but it has support of, I think, the broad forces also within Ukraine. It has financial support. Many states contributed to this particular investigation. And it's unprecedented that more than 40 states actually referred the situation in Ukraine to the prosecutor. So for that reason, the prosecutor may started already investigation, opened investigation in Ukraine. And International Criminal Court has potential, has jurisdiction to prosecute all three international crimes, for the exception of aggression. Can prosecute war crimes, can also prosecute crimes against humanity and genocide. And the ICC may try individuals regardless their nationality. So there is I think, very often we can hear that the ICC doesn't have jurisdiction because over Russians, because Russia is not a part of the ICC. It's not a state party to the ICC. But the investigation in Ukraine is based on territorial principle. So all crimes committed in Ukraine, for the exception of aggression, can be potentially, hypothetically, again, be prosecuted in the ICC. What International Criminal Court can do now now, not in several years, is to send a message to the perpetrators of international crimes by issuing arrest warrants and opening this way of the cases against specific individuals. I think that in this particular conflict, it is very important to send such messages. Unlike the typical crimes that the ICC has investigated before, mostly in Africa, it's just until the Georgian investigation, it was the only continent that was covered by investigations. This war is absolutely exceptional in terms of the coverage, in terms of the evidence that we already have in possession, and the ICC may act, I believe. But unfortunately, especially in case of Russian officials, it would not be realistic to expect this quick results from this investigation, and specifically it would be difficult to expect the quick implementations, the quick execution of the arrest warrants. But I think in terms of the ICC, it's very important that it has jurisdiction, that it investigates the crimes. And it's always a kind of standby option, because we don't have. I think that we shouldn't expect too much from the ICC, but it has important. It plays important role in this process. Very quickly, very briefly, I would like to also to mention initiatives to organize the special tribunal. I think the most probably popular initiative is to establish tribunal for the prosecution of aggression. So the logic behind this proposal is very clear. The ICC doesn't have jurisdiction over the crime of aggression, and aggression should be prosecuted. It should be because it is central to this situation, to this war. For that reason, the initiative has been established. There are many important lawyers and politicians that's part of this initiative. But still, it is not clear what would be the legal basis for such tribunal. So what should it be? Whether it should be established by the General Assembly of the United Nations? And here the open question is how many states are ready to support this initiative. And this is an issue which doesn't have any. I mean, this question doesn't have any answer yet. So, how many states actually ready to support this? Another initiative, another option is to include regional organizations such as Council of Europe or even European Union, but it also has its own problems that actually shifts the focus to the regional security from the global problem, which aggression is. So. There are many different options, but it's already clear that this war, the number of crimes, the scale of the sheerness of the illegality requires the multi-system, the complex approach that it will include national jurisdiction, but also will include international criminal justice. All states have a right to prosecute these crimes. It's not the fact that they do it. We see that some states are more active in this initiative. Some even open their own investigations under the principle of universal jurisdictions. They do investigation, then question the witnesses, they question the refugees. There is a huge potential in further investigation in different European countries where the refugees from Ukraine, the persons with the eyewitnesses fled from the country. But I think that it's of course also the question of time. So that's important, that this investigation will become relevant, and that is very important to not to lose the pace, not to lose the time, and to employ the best strategies that are available in particular situation. That can be very disappointing, not to see certain people behind bars, not to catch certain individuals, but this is a long and not easy process that is ahead. Of course, there are lots of challenges. I would like just to list some of them, and one of the problems, of course, that the state which is behind aggression, it's Russian Federation. I think there is no doubt of this. Is a state which employs a very I think the strategy of denial of the crimes. It was already mentioned by Sebastian opening this discussion that Russian officials, Russian government actually denies everything. It employs a very massive information weapon against its own people. It isolates the millions, the more than hundreds of millions of Russians from the objective information. It's a big problem, because this the justice which will not be seen as impartial, and it actually the justice that had certain factual basis, it would be unlikely be received, and it would be a problem. And we still have this problem in Yugoslavia, for example, in the former Yugoslavia, where even the similar atrocities, like in Srebrenica massacre, for example, is still denied by the huge, actually by majority of the Bosnian Serbs, for example, the population of Bosnian Serbs, and also by huge, but the serious part of the Serbian population in Serbia. This is, I think, one of the challenges, that the work with society and the work with the state, because the change of the change in this regard would mean the change of the long-term practice of Russia. So the tradition to not to deny any responsibility, any historical responsibility, is a really serious problem. So we have to change this. It didn't happen, unfortunately, after the previous after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The terror, where the millions of Russians, first of all, have been killed, there was no proper not only prosecution, but the proper assessment by the society. There was still work that has not been done in this regard. So the only chance to actually prosecute for crime, I think, was the criminal case opened after on Katyn massacre, of the killing of the Polish prisoners of war in 90s. So there was investigation was opened, and at that time, in 90s, there were even some perpetrators. They were alive at that time, but this attempt was also failed. And now, if you look at the statements of some of the Russian officials, it's not yet, officially denied again. So they denial, but we could see that it's even doubt. It's even there are doubts on the version of that the Polish prisoners have been killed by Soviet secret police. So this requires change in Russia, I think. The selectivity of the prosecution. So I think it's a kind of plague of the international criminal law, that it's much more selective than even the national criminal law, which is also selective. So it's when you have so many crimes, when you have so much illegality, it is it is very difficult to adapt a strategy that would be successful, because we will be always argument that some people are scapegoats and some people are impune, some people are free from any responsibility for commission of international crimes. There would be also some legal issues, such as immunities of state officials. I think it would be quite relevant in terms of the International Criminal Court, but also in the prosecution in other states than Russia and Ukraine. And finally, one problem that inevitably will be, I think, one of the central issues in this discussion is the so-called peace and justice alternative. Now we are very far from peace, I think. So in this particular moment, it seems that all initiatives for peace talks and peace agreement are very kind of remote, but I think it's inevitably, it would be inevitable in this conflict. And the current peace initiatives actually are very, I would say, very say nothing about the responsibility for war crimes and other international crimes. So even the peace agreement, which is now manufactured by some international lawyers, I would not like to discuss this initiative. It's a lot of discussions in the blogosphere and the media. It doesn't mention at all any questions of individual responsibility for the crimes committed there. I think it would be inevitably a problem. On the one hand, yes, the peace peace is necessary, and it would be inevitable compromise between certain efforts to bring perpetrators to justice and achieving peace and prevent further deterioration of the situation in Ukraine. However, we all know that without justice, without punishing of the perpetrators of these crimes, these atrocities, any peace would be just illusory. I think what we really have in this conflict, that we should learn these lessons. We should prevent another Bucha in the future. But this is difficult to speak about this when the war is still ongoing. But we should not lose the focus that one of the reasons for, maybe not for the war as such, but for the crimes which are being committed right now, is that we have this climate and impunity. We haven't done enough, I think, to prevent this, because one of the most important factors in the commission of the crime is that the crimes of the past have not been punished, and the idea of the responsibility not only the threat of sanction, but the responsibility as a duty to prevent the commission of the crimes has not become a part of the culture in this region, which has already been the field for many unspeakable crimes, and this continue to be, unfortunately, the crime scene. So I would be happy to discuss with you some other issues, but I think that my time is out, and I would be happy to answer your questions and discuss all issues related to our topic today. So thank you very much, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bogush. It was a very enlightening lecture with plenty of questions to be prompted by it. We meanwhile have already one question in the chat. Any other Participants can still enter their questions there, and I will ask them. If not, I have plenty of questions of my own. First question is by Thomas van Bucha, stating that in the relation between the US and the ICC, we have seen that from the moment that US officials threatened to be investigated by the court, the US sanctioned the prosecutor and other ICC personnel. For now, it seems that Russia has not reacted in this way, probably because it doesn't think it is likely that the ICC will succeed in getting hold of any of its nationals. But what kind of reaction would you expect from Russia once the concrete arrest warrants are being issued against some of its nationals?
It's really a bit different tactic that was employed by the United States and Russia, because for Russia it was too remote all this time. You know, even the two investigations, Georgia, of the events in 2008, and now in Ukraine. It's still very remote opportunity. So it's not what probably US had in mind when the prosecutor moved with the investigation in Afghanistan. So I expect that, of course, it would be some kind of reaction. I'm not sure about the sanctions. Maybe I don't think it would be really any threat to the ICC, because unlike United States, I don't think that the prosecutor in the foreseeable future will visit officially Russian Federation, the territory of the Russian Federation. So I don't think it would be really important in this discussion. But what we see now from there are already certain statements that repeat the same mantra, that we are not, we don't recognize the ICC. So just a slight change in rhetorics. It's a little bit, more bitter words, but it's actually the same. So the strategy of Russia is just we are completely disengaged from the court. We are not we don't recognize it. And now we had several foreign leaders who talked personally to Vladimir Putin about the international crimes and the responsibilities. The first was I think Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, who raised this issue, and there was a reaction was that we are not there is nothing to discuss, because this is not we who commit these crimes. And the most recent I think witness was much more important, because he personally visited Putin. It's Austrian Prime Minister Karl Nehammer. And he also raised this question, and the answer of Putin was that yes, we agree to cooperate with international investigations, but we don't know that what could be this international investigation. International investigation that we now see is the Western, the Western projects. We don't recognize it. So I think this such rhetoric will be continued, and I'm not expecting any movement in this. What the United States, I think it's also important factor, because if it would be quite predictable to hear from Russian officials that, well, look at the United States. United States is also not a part of the ICC, so we would just do the same that United States is doing. So it would be, I think, very difficult, since it's very hard to expect that United States really change its position vis-a-vis International Criminal Court.
Thank you. Could you perhaps elaborate on the link you pointed at between the manifest illegality of the war on the one hand and the severity of the breaches of international law on the other?
No, I think the link is that this war, as such, as at least for Russian army, for Russian armed forces, and for Russian citizens, is still not called the war. It's somehow it is called different by different names, mostly by like operation, special operation, and it's always highlighted by the authorities that it's not that's not a war against the state of Ukraine, but it's a war against certain you know, Nazi members, battalions, etc. So this, I think, create the situation when the whole war is kind of secret. So the people who the soldiers who are sent to Ukraine, they see that it's not actually the same situation that they probably expected from this, and it's create the situation when everything is kind of lie, and this illegality is so obvious that it includes, I think, the huge degree of impunity. So I think it allows these things to happen. So I think it's obvious, of course, any without the use of force, and without in most cases it's an act of aggression that starts international armed conflict. At least we are talking today about international armed conflict. It's very often at least illegal on the one part of one state. And it of course creates it establishes the sin for committing of the war crimes. There is no war without violations of the IHL. There is no war without war crimes. But I think what is really unique in this war, that is so manifestly illegal, that really has certain impact. It's multiple people. So I think decisions that are taken in this war are taken on different levels. We can see some episodes which probably are initiative of specific, you know, soldiers, that can be kind of policy decisions. So I don't think there is a one explanation, but I think the very nature of this war plays an important role in how the troops are behaving on the ground.
We have another question by Professor Roman Petrov. What is the status of the special operation under Russian and international law? What are possible legal grounds to apply chemical/nuclear weapons against Ukraine under Russian law?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are many questions in one, I think. So the status of in terms of Russian law, I think it's not established what is really happening in terms of international law, but in terms of Russian law, it's the use of armed force abroad. It's provided in the constitution. Constitution doesn't say anything about the specific legal ground to do this. But it mentions that it should be done in accordance with international law. So far, the only explanation in international legal language was offered by the letter to the International Court of Justice. Russia did not attend the hearing on provisional measures in the ICJ, but post facto sent the short memo, the short letter that explained its legal position. So in particular, it explained what is the legal basis in international law for starting this operation. And it's mostly focused on the Article 51 of the United Nations Charter that provide for the right for self-defense. So there are two limbs, I think. So one is that Russia defends itself from the future attack against the territory of Russia from Ukraine. It includes allegations of manufacturing weapons, but it's in terms of international law, it's very weak theory because it's not recognized that this preventive self-defense is actually it's not accepted. And the second theory is the defense of so-called People's Republic. So the two entities that have been recognized as independent states 2 days before the operation started. So this is essential, and actually there was, according to international law, to United Nations Charter, it also provided procedural requirement that the letter should be sent to the Security Council, to the United Nations Security Council. It's a notification. It was also sent by the Russian representation in the United Nations. So we can say that official position of the Russia vis-a-vis the start of the military operation is the self-defense, at least as the leading theory. But it's not only my view, but the view of, I think, 100% of international lawyers, for the small exception of Russian branch of the ILA, that it's absolutely implausible. About the weapons, actually, the chemical weapons are at least what we know, what falls within the definition. It's a prohibited weapon. It cannot be used by in any circumstances. So it's prohibited weapons. So it's not only prohibited; it's criminal under Russian law. As nuclear weapons are concerned, there is a so-called military strategy, and the concept of security, of national security of the Russian Federation, that define the probable the reasons for the use of nuclear weapons, except for the cases of self-defense from nuclear attack. It also mentioned the attack from the conventional to defense of about conventional weapons, but only those attack which presents the existential threat to the Russian Federation. Also important aspects that at least the Russian law does not distinguish between so-called tactical and strategic nuclear weapons in terms of the use of nuclear weapons. It just defined that nuclear weapons can be used. So there is no distinction based on the type of nuclear weapons, because now there is a talk about that. Yes, tactical, of course, nuclear weapons can be used, but not strategical nuclear weapons. Quite recently, just I think it was yesterday, there was another intervention of the spokesperson of the president Peskov, who twice said that it's not considered to use the use of the nuclear weapons. And probably today, maybe yesterday, there was also Foreign Minister Lavrov. He also said that it's not on the table at all. So in the operation, Russia will use conventional weapons only.
Thank you. I think we have room for one more question. As lawyers, we are careful to use certain terminology, such as genocide. It is a political statement to be used with caution. However, certain governments have already called it genocide, not in the least. The US government has called it genocide, the Polish government, and so on. However, I feel that there's a risk of minimizing the actual explicit intentions of some of the messaging of the Russian Federation if we refuse to call something genocide before it's properly prosecuted in a court of law. There's a lot to be said about, the integration of the propaganda apparatus in the Russian media sphere. Is there anything about what happened in Bucha, for instance, or any other serious core crimes that could, change the opinion both inside Russia and outside on the question of whether or not this is a genocide? Like, is there any way of proving to the people in general that the intentions to actually destroy a group of people is there?
Yes, thank you. I think that there are three three groups of people in this thing. And so you mentioned two of them, lawyers, yes, so the legal profession who have the legal definition of genocide in mind. There is also political, and there are also, you know, other people who are not necessarily have any idea of genocide in mind. So I think it's difficult to say whether it can be productive to speculate and to designate too early about this, because genocide unfortunately has also it's a very dangerous concept that can be also used very in a productive way, because it also kind of stigmatize certain nations, because in reality, not in law, of course, we in the international criminal law, we don't know the genocide committed by certain nations against certain nations. So, for example, the majority group against minority group. But in reality, we could see that perpetrators represent one group and victims represent another group that is designated for destruction. So I think it's quite because of the group nature of genocide. I think there is a great literature about that. Many famous lawyers and also philosophers wrote about that genocide has kind of it's a controversial concept that has also its own I think dangerous aspects, which can be unproductive, especially when this title, this label is used lightly. Back to the events such as in Bucha, to be honest, I cannot exclude that certain perpetrators have genocidal intent, as it is defined in international law. So it's quite easy to imagine that. But the same was in Yugoslavian war. So, for example, some perpetrators, even those who have been convicted by ICTY, the tribunal, International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, it cannot be excluded that they had this intent. They had intent to destroy at least part of the group by the action, but it still did not change the characterization of the events as genocide. So the genocide has kind of it's on the one hand it's a crime of individuals, but in practice it also the act of state, because the International Court of Justice at least recognizes that state may commit genocide by their agents. So of course it's human, it's individuals who commit genocidal act, but in all recognized genocide there was some policy behind that. And about rhetoric, I already said, I think it's very dangerous and it should be legal action, and international criminal law actually provides for the ground for that. It provides for the special rule that public incitement of genocide is punishable as international crime. So I hope that these atrocities can be prosecuted, even under different labels. So genocide is a very well known, but I think crimes against humanity are not the. It's also very important and very instrumental in assessing what happened in this war.
Thank you so much. I believe that is the end of our time here. I will first make a little time for an advertisement, namely that on the 26th of April, so next Tuesday, we have another lecture. It's called Back in the USSR, the State of Social Media in Russia amid the invasion of Ukraine, by Rashid Gabdulhakov of the University of Groningen. Having said that, I would love to thank Dr. Gleb Bogush for his very interesting talk, as well as the very riveting answers to our questions. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.